I think we got some questions in chat, right?
Mm.
We've got like the most technical community ever. Like I was hoping we would get some like, hey, what's it like to be a part of the community questions instead. Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Philip. So what's the best option to send customized logs? And would Beat still work or should we use something like Logstash?
Yes. So, you know what is the favorite answer at Elastic?
It depends.
Exactly. It depends. No, in that case, it maybe doesn't depend that much. So if you have custom logs, so let's say you have a custom whatever application. If you have like a programming language where you have a regular logger, we have log appenders for ECS. So we talked about ECS a moment ago, the Elastic Common Schema, which is basically this naming convention. So if you write your own custom application and you can change that logger, pick our logging extension for the right language, like for Java, for Python, for Ruby, whatever. There's always an ECS logger. So you just add that logger and it will write out the ECS compatible file, which is JSON. Basically, you point file B to that, and then it will just tailf the JSON file and store it directly in Elasticsearch, and you're done. And you don't need to do any parsing. You don't need Logstash. You're done. If you have like a third-party application where you cannot change anything, then it's a bit more unfortunate. Then you can still point file B at the log file, but then you need to bring in your own regular expressions to parse that. And you know, what is the plural of regex?
Pain.
No, it's regret. That's what happens when you write too many regular expressions. Or I always jokingly say like, writing regular expressions is like the Stockholm syndrome. At some point, you start liking it and accept it as your fate. We hope you don't end up there, but this is what you can get.
I think to follow up on that, I fell into that hole. I think when I started, I remember asking you questions of like, so I have this painless script, and you're just like, why? But why though? And it's like, well, why not? And you know, just over time, you learn that there really is more than one way to do a lot of different things with Elastic, and what may be one person's best practice might be someone else's. Like, why would you ever do that? There's 15 other ways that you can do this, and this is, in my opinion, the best way. And speaking of the best way, we have another question that says, wondering the best indices structure like prod, non-prod, or application name, or some other way. I have my thoughts.
What is the answer?
Again, it depends.
As always.
I personally think that when you're naming something, I don't think the naming is as important as the consistency in which how you do it. For me, I tend to put upfront in all caps what I'm doing. Maybe not necessarily prod versus non-prod, because as advocates, our setups, our structures are a little differently. Like we're not building the next, $1 million app. We're, building the best 10-minute demo that we can make for you. So for us, a lot of it is like, okay, what's the conference name? What's the, is this our test? Is this our AWS version? Is this our Azure version, our GCP version? Is this cloud? Is it in Docker? Like, we want to know exactly what information we can glean as quickly as possible.
Right. And I think for many other applications, the two options you often have is either you have like a time series data store problem, like you have logs or metrics, whatever, that happen over a time, or you have more like this full text search problem, which is like Wikipedia, GitHub, Stack Overflow. They all use Elasticsearch for full text search. And there you would structure your data differently, because there you would have, well, the data doesn't grow that much. So you kind of like start with what you have, and then it will grow maybe 10%, 20%, 50% a year, but not more. Whereas the time series data store they have a different problem, because you basically have a new set of data coming in every day. So for the search use case, you generally have a name like the application and then production or development maybe. For time series, you will probably have something to actually create new indices more or less frequently, because of the retention of the data, because you normally cannot have, for cost reasons, keep all the data around forever. So you want to kind of, after 30 days, after 90 days, whatever, you want to get rid of that data again. Deleting individual documents is expensive, so deleting the entire index is always the way to go. Thanks to index lifecycle management that we recently added with, or ILM, the abbreviation, you can define these rules where you can say after 50 gigs of data or 30 days, create another index, and then you roll over to that new index. And then once you have reached the maximum retention time that you want to have for some data, you just delete the entire old index and you don't need to worry about that. And then with ILM, it's pretty much up to you how you name it. If you bring in the application name or development and production, if you even want to have them on the same server in. So those are all the options that you have. Generally, don't make tiny shards because they're expensive in terms of file handles and memory and so on. So create something that creates enough data that you will create large enough shards for whatever makes sense in your retention to work with that. Did we have any other questions?
I don't think we have any questions in the chat, but I have a question for Lisa. So
Yeah.
Lisa, you're like our premier, like amazing getting started crash course guide creator and video person. And everyone in the conference, if you haven't watched her videos yet, do so on our YouTube channel. Click subscribe, ring the bell, all those great things. But I have to ask,
Yes.
what has been like the hardest concept to teach to beginners in your courses that you've seen?
The hardest one I had to teach, I would say explaining relevance. So there are so many factors that come into measuring relevance of a search engine. And just if you look at all these like algorithms, like you're like, okay, like how do I explain this to somebody like who has never even heard of this before? So just really trying to digest like what precision is, what recall is, how do you calculate a score of a document, et cetera. I think that has been the toughest challenge for me so far. Yeah.
I would have sworn like for me, I think it was like the cluster like node relationship because you always get that balancing question of like, well, how many shards should I have? How many nodes should I have? How many replica nodes are there? How many clusters is optimal? And you're just like, again, I think Philipp's favorite answer. Like it depends. There's a lot of factors that go in and it's all based on your needs and requirements. And I mean, I would also think like the idea of convincing people to explore and go deeper. Like that's the thing that I've learned just in this conference so much is that there's so many things you can do. I learned today I learned you can do an entire conference presentation using our internal tools in Kibana. Like that is amazing. I'm still kind of blown that Canvas is like that powerful.
Since both of you joined us more or less recently, wait, how many months has it been?
It's been about half a year for me.
For me, I recently did my quarterly. So maybe 3 months, a little over 3 months. Yeah.
A little over 3 months. So
Yeah.
how is life as an advocate at Elastic now?
It's awesome because I've been at like multiple different tech companies with like different cultures. And I feel like we're just given so much freedom on like what type of topics we would like to focus on, which community we would like to engage with, how would we like to engage with the community. So for me, I love creating workshops and posting it on YouTube and doing live workshops, or I love blogging. So just having that freedom to choose whatever you want and having multiple team members across time zones. And I would just like reach out to Philip or Alex and like, I'm confused. What's a node? And you guys would just like show up and just explain everything so well. So I just feel really supported here. And I mean, one of the things that I really admire about Jay is his diversity initiatives that he gets to focus on as a developer advocate. And I was wondering if you could share more about that and share your experience.
Yeah. So for me, reaching out to community, like my heart has always been in community because as a developer, I was community taught. Like I joined the Slacks, I jumped in. Well, Discord wasn't a thing at the time, but I asked questions on Twitter. Like I didn't know what I didn't know until there were people around that showed me. And part of that was I grew up in an area where, you know, to be frank, being a person of color and being a developer were just two things you didn't see that. Like there were no black developers where I grew up. So I didn't know that developer advocacy was even an option until like I think a year or two before I joined Elastic. And for me, a big part of what I do for the diversity standpoint is I want to make sure that there is a presence for folks like me, folks like Lisa, folks like Philip. Everyone can see that like we're a mixed bag of really awesome people that just do like really awesome stuff. And I mean, I will say, I think the freedom that two things, the Elastic community team, but also the Elastic Stack itself gives you the ability to use is just amazing. I was afraid to get my eyebrow pierced when I joined Elastic, which is like one of those silly things because I had worked in a corporate culture for so long. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get fired if I make this big decision. And it's like, I'm in my 30s. Why can't I act like an adult and make decisions for myself? You know, all this other stuff. But at the same time, like the only feedback that I got was like, whoa, that's new and it's awesome. And I was like, okay, cool. 5 more piercings later. I'm kidding. No, we're not going crazy. I promise. But on the other side of that, I was able to also tackle topics that are challenging and answer really tough questions. And I was able to use the Elastic Stack as a whole to do that. I was able to say, let's build diversity search applications using App Search. Let's document police stop records using Elon and using like just Elastic Cloud and storing all of that. And there was never like a question of, well, this is going to be a dangerous topic. It was just like, no, these are things that are important to you. We want to support you. We want to support the things that are important to you. Let's do it. Let's go for it. And let's, you know, do everything that we can to make that a reality.
Since we just got a question on chat about getting hired, and you have recently run through that process, how was the hiring process? Do you want to share something about that?
Mine was intimidating in all the good ways, I guess. Everybody was like super cool. Like I remember one of the people that interviewed me, George, shout out to George, like I have ADHD, so I was like trying to focus on him and answer his questions, but he had like all of these Lego sets behind him. I was just like, I can't stop. Is that a Death Star? Like, I think I literally interrupted him halfway and it's like, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but that's cool. And he just kind of laughed and rolled with it. And like, we had a conversation. So there were a lot of great conversations with great folks, and I'm kind of happy that I get to work with them every day. The interview process was pretty chill. No one asked me about my education because I'm a college dropout, and that would have been a bad answer. No one, you know, asked me about work-life balance because it's just a thing that happens here. Like, I felt at home from like the first interview.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I felt so welcomed, and the process was just so like genuine and like natural. So I was working at a different startup at the time, and we were using Elasticsearch, and I saw this job opening that was like developer advocacy was like my dream job. So I applied, and I came across Philip's blog on what it's like to be a developer advocate at Elastic. So I reached out to him, and he was so kind. Like he got on a Zoom call with me, and I was just really focused on like, what is the culture there? Like change is the only constant. Everybody's super supportive, but you got to pave your own path. And I found that really attractive, and I just kept wanting to like move forward with the process. And then I heard back from the recruiter, and I got to talk to like the program side and also the developer advocacy side. And they just really wanted to know who I am as a person, what drives me, what talents could I bring to the team, what developer advocacy meant to me. And for me, I just never felt like I was being grilled or like interrogated as like usually like the interview goes sometimes. And I don't know, just like every step of the way, I just felt so welcomed, and I don't know, I just couldn't. I was thrilled when I got the call. So yeah.
I think the hardest part for me was talking to Philip after I was hired, because people don't realize Philip is like the hardest working person I've ever met. Like, he's up literally 20 hours a day.
What time is it over there, Philip?
So I think now it's 4:30.
Yeah, in the morning. So he, like, when we were talking, his first thought was like, so do you like to travel? Do you like to go to conferences? Because I did like 80 conferences last year. And in my eyes, just like they just widened. I was like, there's no way my wife will let me do 80 conferences. Like, I've got a 2-year-old, like I'm dead. And he's like, but no, you don't have to do that. Like, that's just what I did. And I was like, okay, Philip, I've got developer advocate goals now, 80 conferences or bust 2025. Give myself some time to ramp up to that.
Maybe it's not a goal. Maybe it just happens.
Well, and maybe that's a good question. I know we need to start wrapping up. How did you take to, like, doing a lot of conferences, always being on the go, to everything kind of just stopping, and then now everything is now online? Like, did that slow you down any? Did you have to rethink your strategy at all?
No, I always like, Shai once said it very nice. He always said, when he was asked, like, do you miss coding? Because now as a CEO, he doesn't code anymore. He always said, like, I like solving problems. And I think I like that approach very much. That I like solving problems. And at first, I mean, I'm looking forward to traveling again, but I liked solving the conference problem. But right now it's different problems. So now we solve these. I have one last stupid question. Jay, you have a proper green screen.
Do you want me to do the trick? Or just like...
No, it's fine, it's fine. And I was mostly wondering, Lisa, do you also have a green screen, or is that Walter? Everybody's so professional.
Yep.
So only me with a...
Yeah.
We're just lazy. We don't want to clean our office.
Exactly. You only knew what's behind this green screen.